place where our entrepreneurs can come and connect with the community.
There's a real kind of vibe and a real energy here that's about supporting entrepreneurs.
We have two presenters each week, two entrepreneurs who come and tell about their journey. They each have about 6 minutes to present.
You're telling people what you're up to, and you're essentially getting feedback from them.
There's about 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A. All the questions that they ask has really got us thinking about new ways to think about our business.
We're just able to get that feedback from the rest of the community.
So over the years, we've added more cities. There's a great energy here to see what's happening across the country.
Last question for you, what can we as a community do for you?
So what can we as a community do to help you question is what really pull us as a community around every single presenter.
When somebody applies to present to one of the cups, they're instructed to watch a series of videos through the College University website.
It's invaluable information for someone who's founding a startup.
I felt better, prepared, more confident, and I think a little more focused than I would have been otherwise. And I'm not talking videos about it, so it was a great way to prepare.
I really like the educational component of one-on-one cups because it does create that open forum.
You can hear great ideas that will help you start thinking even more about what you want to do with your business.
What I've learned from other entrepreneurs is very, very valuable.
The cool thing about one-on-one cups is that you're amongst other people like yourself.
Just hearing someone talk about their startup, it just magically think, wow, there's other people out there like myself.
Sitting in a room with other people that have ideas too, it helps people to believe that, you know what, my idea is worth something. It's worth pursuing. It's worth going after. Even if it looks like a challenge, I can still go out and try to do it.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to 1 Million Cups Waco. If you haven't already, don't forget to check in. We have an app. It's a good way to just kind of see who's here. And if you don't have one, just create a quick profile, get you some information on what you do, where you're with, and just kind of connect with people. You'll get to meet some new people around here as well. And then also, I want to say thank you to just a few sponsors here. We want to give a round of applause to Hustle for the space that they give us here every Wednesday. I want to thank Pinewood Roasters for the coffee in the back. If you haven't already, go ahead and get you a cup of coffee. It's great. I've already had my cup, so I'm ready to go. This weather, and I tell you, coffee just does something to get you going. So, and then I also want to say thank you for Colin. He's unfortunately out of town today for Clever Guys Media. He does our Facebook live stream, but however, we're still doing that today. So if you have questions, comment below, and we'll see if we can get you into the Q&A for Michael as he's presenting. So to get started, what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and invite Michael up just to kind of give you a brief overview. Michael is going to be presenting Choose Your Reader. It's an app that he has created and in development with. It just launched, I believe, in January, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to pass it off to you, sir.
All right. Make sure I know how to operate the remote control here. There we go. All right. So, choose your reader. I guess, obviously, you're here today. It's supposed to be the idea, right? The big idea is what we're here to talk about. Yeah. And so, before I do that, though, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about who I am. So, who am I? I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law for 20 years here in Texas. And I'm also a screenwriter. I've been doing that for about 5 years. And then suddenly I found myself as a children's book author. And so I've been doing that for just now about 3 years. And so those things don't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, right? They're disconnected, right? They're not disconnected. I'm a storyteller at the end of the day, right? Whether your story is being presented to a jury or whether I'm telling it on a screen or in a book format, it's all about a narrative arc. It's all about creating a story that people can follow, okay? And so I'm also a dad, right? That's the most important thing in my life. And so one of the things that I've been able to do is blend being a dad with being a storyteller, and that's what Choose Your Reader is all about. That's what we're going to talk about today. So, the other thing about this is that I'm a dad, but I'm a divorced dad. So I'm not with my son every day, all day, and that was one of the challenges because as a storyteller, right, you want to read stories to your kids at night. That entire experience was something that I was missing once I was no longer with my son each and every night. And so, my storytelling skills I'm going to put on display here. I'm going to tell you a true story. All right, one night I had my son, we're going to bed, putting him in there, and he says, "Dad, tell me a story." So he's got a bookshelf. I go over to the bookshelf, to get one of the books, and he goes, no, make one up. Right? Now, the good news is I'm a storyteller, right? That's right in my sweet spot. He doesn't know that though. So I said to him, you want a story, you have to tell me what's in it. Give me 3 things you want in your story. And so he said, baseball, a soccer ball, and a golf ball. Okay, now this is a challenge, right? So what ended up happening is I ended up creating a story called From Good to Bad to Great. All right, so I tell him the story off the top, and I just create it right then and there, and he loves it. Fantastic. So the next night, he wants it again. But I just made it up. So I don't know where to get it. So I had to write these stories down, and so I started this game with him. He wants a story, he's got to tell me what's in it, and ultimately, what I ended up doing was creating this book. Because as you can imagine with a kid, right, he wants pictures. So he says, Dad, where are the pictures? And I don't have the ability to draw. So I ended up going out and having to have these books illustrated. But now I've got this investment, right? I've made these books, he's got them, and what am I going to do with them? So do I want to go out and become a published author, right? Go send these out to agents and publishers, and 14 years from now, they're going to say okay and publish the book and move on? No, I didn't want to do that. So I kept thinking about what else could I do? Could I become an independent publisher? Publish them myself, right? But no. Once you do that, if you know anything about independent book publishing, you're on the road, right? You're out doing all these speaking events and trying to really promote your book, and that's taking me away from my son. And that didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I've got this concept here of, I've got books, and I want to really use them to connect with my son, and I want to make sure that I can do that. How do I get them out and really show some sort of value for this investment? That was the challenge. So going through the books that we made, right, these are all his ideas that came up. The Perfect Mistake, Go Higher, Go Low, right? Take a Deep Breath. These all came out of him giving me ideas. And on the fly, I would come up with a story, and then here it is, and I'd have to write it down. I'd literally run into my bedroom and type it out just as I had told it to him 3 minutes earlier so that I didn't forget it, all right? So the thing that I thought about was, I had this idea, right? I'm a divorced dad, but I want to be able to read stories to my son, and I'm not always with him. But there are a lot of other people who are not with the kids that they love, right? So if you're in the military, you work late at night, you travel for work, right? Or even if you're grandparents and you just live in another zip code, another city, state, country, you want to be able to connect with these kids that are not necessarily near you. And so I thought, we got to put these stories on an app, right? So I looked for a storytelling app, and there are a few out there, but they're not very good because they have one key element missing, which is the engagement of the adult with the child. That's what I wanted, was I wanted to read to my son whenever he wanted me to read to him, not whenever I was physically present. And so that was the challenge, right? So I built an app and I said, I'm a dad, but I'm also a writer. And that's proof that I'm a writer. That's a writing critique group, and the arrow shows me there if you can see it. So that's me in a writing group, and that's talking to writers and looking at it as a writer, but also as a father. How would I want this app to function? What would it do? And it would do a lot of things, right? I would be able to use it, and no matter where I was, I'd be able to go work with it, but I'd also be able to use it in terms of between apps, right? Between phones, right? So it got to work Android to iOS and back and forth. I had all these thoughts about what it should do, what it could do, and that's really what I came up with. So I'm going to walk you through kind of a visual of how this works. So the way it works is you've got the story. When you press record, the words are highlighted. You've been through like a karaoke machine, right? If you can use a karaoke machine, whether you sing well or not, if you know how karaoke machine works, you know how Choose Your Reader works. The words are highlighted for you to create pace. You read according to the pace. As you go along, it's just continuing to highlight. It's recording your voice as you read it out loud. The child's experience is exactly the same. They hear your voice, the words are highlighted for them. So this is a literacy component as well as a relationship building opportunity for you and the child, okay? So you get to the end of the story. They can be from, we have stories that are 10 pages, stories that are over 30 pages. You get to the end, and then you save the story. And now it is saved on your device. And then you can share it via email or text. So you just send it on. The other person receives it, they can click it, they hear your voice, they see the picture, they see the words highlighted, along with the proper pacing, and you are having an experience with that child where you are reading to your son or daughter, grandchild, niece, nephew, whatever, whether you're at work, you're on the golf course, you're in another country, they can have you reading to them anytime, any place. So that's the basic premise of Choose Your Reader as a concept. Now, the revenue model. I've toyed with this and looked at this a number of ways, and so just in the last 48 hours, I have made the personal commitment to build the subscription model. And I'll tell you a little bit about why I was able to make that commitment in a second. But we're also looking at a white label version where we can basically give this to, for example, school districts. So you could have the XYZ ISD has their own reading app with content in it that the teachers are able to read to their students, and literally mom or dad sitting at home, bing, pops up in their phone, you've got a new story from Mrs. Jones or Mr. Smith, whatever the teacher is, and now the kid is getting quote unquote homework, which is a literacy component. And the beauty of it is teachers are overworked, right? We know this. They don't have to record the story over and over and over again. You record that story once and you teach for 10 years, that story is available for 10 classes, 10 years of classes, right? So we're reducing the kind of work that they need to do, but increasing their engagement, all right? The other thing that we're looking at is through an ESL environment. If you know anything about ESL families, they have a lack of English in the home in a lot of instances. So you go home at night, you go home for the weekend, Christmas break, spring break, and for goodness sake, summer break. The child comes back to school having had very little access or exposure to English and restarts that English familiarity. Well, we are giving them the opportunity in a home where there is no English to have English access 24/7. Take that the other way, right? We live in a fairly monolingual country right now in terms of our education, and most of us. How many of you speak more than one language? Okay? We live in a monolingual country. However, if we use this the opposite way, so my son speaks English, Spanish, Mandarin, and a little bit of Korean. I don't speak any of those other than English. If you can give your child access to a language that you don't even speak yourself, now you're doing something interesting, okay? So that's what this is partly about, is the ability to provide that instruction and that education without the limitations of what you have in your home. All right, so what's our status? As we mentioned, we launched the beta January 1st, 2019. That was an exciting moment, but you can't just launch the beta and clap, right? You gotta move on. So I had some goals that I set out for myself on January 1st. Once we were launched, I said I wanna be able to file my patent. I wanna create categories in the app, right? You wanna be able to do it just like Netflix, right? I know that I want a horror film or a rom-com the same way. I want different kinds of stories. I wanna be able to access those and find them easily, so we created categories is what I wanted to do. I wanted 20 stories, I wanted 2 foreign languages, and I wanted to have at least 2 authors because I can't write everything myself, right? So that was my deadline, was the end of this month, and so I'm gonna give you an update on where we are. We have nailed it. So we filed the patent last month. We have categories which we rolled out last weekend. We are now at 28 stories. We're gonna be at 35 by the end of this month. We are in 3 foreign languages currently, and we have 4 authors out there. So, exceeded the expectations that I had. Maybe I didn't set the goals high enough, but either way, we did it. So I'm really excited about that. So I want to show you basically, this is go high or go low. You saw it in the English. So setup is again, so we're able to put these in any different language we want. This is take a deep breath, and these are French and Spanish, right? So we can have that access for you. The goal by the end of June is 10 languages available for a variety of stories. Some stories are not going to translate well, so we will not do that. Rhyming stories, wordplay stories, those don't make sense if you translate them. But stories where they're just straight narrative structure, that will work very well. And so these stories will be available in a variety of languages. So we've got Cinderella. I just last night approved the illustrations for Snow White. So we're able to really push the envelope because that public domain of storytelling is out there. And so the number of stories is almost infinite, right? All the stories you think about growing up, if they're not under a copyright, we can take them, illustrate them ourselves, and push them out on the app. Also, just if anyone here has ever known a writer or is a writer, you think about the time it takes to get a book into the market. That's roughly 18 months, start to finish, all right? If you bring me a completed manuscript, 45 days, start to finish, for our app. And we can get it in 10 languages in 90 days, start to finish. All right, in 150 countries. So, rethink the way you think about storytelling, right? The whole idea of a publisher wanting to be able to maximize value, right? Harry Potter, we were just talking about Harry Potter, right? The story of how long it took Harry Potter to get published as a first book was because the publishers didn't believe that there was a market for it. And they understood the thousands of dollars. It takes $50,000 to get a book, one book on one shelf for the first time, right? It takes me $1,000 to get a book, right? On 150 countries, on every cell phone out there. It cost me $1,000 to do that. All right, so a couple of other things to think about. Let's see here. So if you want to, you can download it, go to your app store. You can also, if you want to use the QR code up here on the screen, if your phone can capture that. If anyone wants to do that, let me know. We do have the QR code. The question of how you can help, I'm going to jump in. These are small and these are large because this is really helpful, but this is super huge for me. So a couple of things you can do. Download the app, right? Nobody wants to go to an app that looks like it's got 9 downloads, all right? So the more downloads I get, that's great, that's better for me. Sharing it with your friends and family. Hey, you know, you may not have kids that are age appropriate. We're looking at roughly 3 to 7. You may not have kids in that age range, but you certainly know someone who does, right? You know someone who's a grandparent, a parent, an aunt, uncle, what have you. Any kid in that age range, this has worked great for all the kids that I've worked with. Also authors, as I mentioned, all right, I've got 4, but I'd love to expand the universe. We actually have books. If you talk to authors, one of the challenges is they don't know what to write next, what's going to sell. And so they're basically throwing a dart out there and saying, I hope I hit the thing that this next publisher wants. We already have a list of books that we would like written and simply don't have the time to write it all out ourselves. And so literally I can say, if someone says, I'd like to write a book, I'd say, here's the book, right? And if someone says, for example, I'd like to illustrate something, we have things to be illustrated as well. So the universe of opportunities for people who are creatives in this space is, again, infinite. We're talking Aesop's Fables, right? We have currently Mother Goose, we have a whole series of Mother Goose books. We've got the Grimm fairy tales. Anything you can think of, the Bible, that's something that we're going to be tackling here coming up in the second quarter. So Bible stories, all those kinds of things that you can think of as stories. If you don't know what to write, we have the list of things that we would like on the app. All right, so the other thing that you can do to help us out, introductions to school administrators. That's really important. So we really want to be able to put this into schools and have this access for schools to be able to use on a flat fee basis. So we don't want teachers spending their money recording these, right? Again, they're overworked and underpaid. We want school districts to be able to say, we have paid the fee and every teacher in the school district has access to it. Introductions to military officers, that's an important one to me. I'm not part of a military family, but that's still an important issue to me that I think we really want to be able to have people who are away from their kids serving us and our country to have that connection to those kids so that when they return, that relationship has been growing and being nurtured, not just smashing people together and expecting them to behave as one happy family like nothing's ever happened over the last 18 months that they were gone. So we want to do that. And then the last one is senior home administrators. So again, grandparents who are not necessarily with their families, they're in a facility, they need some kind of care. This is a great opportunity for them to connect. And again, we can have a situation where the nursing home community is paying for a subscription and every member in that community has access that's unlimited. So let's run through a couple of other things here while we got some time. What are we, right? That's the last question that people want to know, right? In terms of what are you? Are you a content creator, a content provider, or a tech company, right? That's the challenge of defining who and what you are. And so my answer to that is pretty straightforward. I'm all of those. I am prepared to do the content creation, and I've done it. I'm prepared to basically create a platform where content that's created by other people can be shared. But I'm also in a position of developing technology. I'm a fairly tech-savvy guy. I'm what they call an early adopter, right? I tell people, like, when did you last have a landline, right? I know when I last had a landline was 1999, no joke. Just got rid of it then. I said, yeah, this phone will work just fine. The classic little flip phone. So I am very much an early adopter, and that's what I'm hoping that I can really take that kind of approach to life and use it to help create a more literate, more educated, no longer monolingual society in America. We got to do better in that regard, and our kids are going to be the ones that are doing better, right? For me, the ability to pick up 3 different languages over the rest of my life is pretty limited. But for kids, they tell you now, 3 to 7, they're soaking that up. So this is our opportunity to really give something to these kids and help them on their path forward. All right, so that's my great idea. That's Choose Your Reader.
Awesome. We're going to go ahead and open up for Q&A. We're going to prefer our expert panelists to kick us off. So you guys go ahead.
If I need a lawyer, I need a lawyer. You're great.
Thank you.
Told a fabulous story.
Thank you.
You packaged your business the way we try to teach people to package their business. You did phenomenal. I really don't have questions other than you thought through everything. I know that sounds grossly oversimplified, but very impressed with what you're doing.
Thank you.
And you're moving very fast. I've already downloaded the app.
Got a question on your $4 per month subscription fee. What's your break-even point on that? How many subscriptions do you have to kind of sell to make sure you're covering your fixed costs that you come up with?
Yeah, so let's separate out fixed costs that are purely for operating versus content acquisition costs.
Yeah.
So if we do that, then my break-even point is about 200 users.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty good. You know, have you thought about another, I think what I like about this is you're emphasizing reading. And that's one thing now that, you know, people don't read anymore. And getting kids to read is great, I think. You know, just, so that's a very positive thing. Another group I was thinking about, had you thought about people in correctional institutions?
I have thought about that.
Yeah.
What I don't know is whether they have access to cell phones and tablets on a regular basis or not. And I assume some minimum security, depending upon the security level, they may or may not. So I've thought about that.
Yeah,
So,
I know there's a story about the farmer bro who's still running his company from prison using a cell phone, so that might be an issue.
but that's good, yeah. So I've thought about it. I just haven't isolated that as something that I want to attack right out of the
I
gate.
think the other groups you've identified are really, you know, major areas of concentration.
The area that caught me when you start talking about the school districts and the other entities like that, so would you be looking at either a subscription basis or a license basis with them, or is that just what you're trying to figure out right now?
Yeah, so the first step in that process was to get the patent filed, right? So that I don't have the fight to be able to say, I've got it, well, someone else has it, and we're now in a price war and all of that. So I've been able to eliminate that. Assuming the patent gets approved, that's now done. Once I've got that, my goal is to be able to say to the school district on an annual basis, you just pay a fee. And so what I've looked into is there's some specific federal funding that goes unused by schools for what they call parent engagement. And so if you know about Title I funds, basically those funds don't get allocated and used enough. So what we're saying to the school district is, this isn't even your budget that you're worried about spending. These are federal dollars that you're not spending, and a way to really maximize that relationship between parent, child, and teacher in a way that hadn't existed until this, as far as I know.
Yeah.
Great.
You'd also be able to utilize that to tap into authors, because you could have students prepare stories and submit stories to you too, as another ancillary part of entering in that community. Because when you've got high school students that are going to go into journalism or see themselves as writers, what a great way for them to be able to hone their skills and at the same time be taking one of your topics and putting together a story. Or illustrators the same way.
No, and I had not considered the possibility. I mean, maybe I'm not sure if you mean this exactly, but a school district has, high school students that are writing and illustrating, and that universe of content can be specific to that school district's app, theoretically. I had not considered that. I am in the process of writing my first comic book with my son, who's now 7. And so, it's funny, like, essentially the experience of writing with a 7-year-old is very different from writing for a 3-year-old, because they have opinions now, right? So it's no longer just give me a baseball, a softball, soccer, and a golf ball, right? He stands in front of a TV, and I sit on the sofa, and you stream the screen to the TV, and as he tells me what's happening, I type it out, and he'll sometimes even correct me. And that's not what happened, right? And so, so that's an interesting experience, but I could see taking that and really pushing it to kids who can write independently and who can illustrate independently. So I love that idea.
Yeah, further resource.
There was a question in the back, and then I'll come to you.
Yeah, Dr. Melissa Ridge, Waco Hypnosis Center. Huge reader. I love this whole thing. But I am curious, you mentioned the Bible and Mother Goose. Aren't those things copyrighted? I mean, how are you going to be able to do that?
Yes, so they are not copyright protected, no. So the basics of it, as I said, right, I'm a lawyer, right? So the first thing I did was figure out what are the confines that I got to stay within. So if you say to me you want green eggs and ham, I have to say I am not Sam, right? I can't deliver that. But if you want the Bible, you want Mother Goose, you want Brothers Grimm, those are old enough that the protection that would have been afforded to them has expired. And so we go through, and so one of the books that we just finished up is The Ballad of John Henry. And we actually had to do some research and call the copyright office and make sure that there wasn't a copyright for that. And so that's part of the process of what we do, is once we've identified the story, we trace it back to its source to be sure that that source does not have some kind of legal right to keep us from that story.
What's the payment structure for the authors and the illustrators?
Yeah, so the illustrators are paid, well, today the illustrators are paid straight up, right? So they come into a project, we identify the cost for that project, they get paid, and they're done. They're finished with their sort of revenue from that project, and we own the illustrations. Currently, the way it's set up, before the subscription model really becomes active, is it's on a per story basis right now. And that was done because I only had, 5 stories, right? So I wasn't gonna make you pay month over month over month, and I got 5 stories. But as that library has grown, and we have been able to, because of the language component, increase the library faster than we could. So essentially, it takes about, like I said, 45 days to get a book on the app from an illustration standpoint. It takes 6 days to get a new language for a book on the app, right? So, in terms of speed, it's very fast. So, but to your question about how are the authors paid, today they're paid on a straight revenue share model because it's a per story price for the user. But once we move to a subscription model, they are paid on an annual basis. If your book is still on the app next year, you're going to get paid a yearly fee. So you're licensing your book to me year over year, the same way that I'm passing it out to the community that's using the book.
I had a question does the receiving person also need the app?
They need the app, but they do not pay. So once you've paid for the app, the story, right? So you buy Cinderella, and you want to send it, you've got 10 grandkids, and you send it out 10 different times. It's the one fee for you. That's the current model.
Okay.
The subscription model would be, and the reason for the subscription model is because you're now able to store your stories in the cloud, and we will save them for you. And there's a whole legacy component that we want to perpetuate there. Right. But basically in the storage model of a subscription, you record Cinderella, you send it out. Each of those people needs a subscription to be able to then receive it and independently store it. So that if you no longer have access to it, if you pass, you lose your phone, whatever it is that happens, that access is now taken away, they've stored it in their individual account. So they have it as long as they maintain their account.
What's your relationship in books for young children that are male versus female?
When you say my relation, you mean?
You have a son. How many of the books would be of interest to your son?
So what I have learned is that the interest of the child based on gender is not as significant the younger they are. My son's sort of appreciation for that's a girl book versus that's a boy book really matured, if you will, at about 5.5 to 6.
Right.
And so that's why Cinderella works for girls, right, in his mind, but that's not for boys. So that's why he and I are writing Mean Pineapple versus Mr. Awesome, right?
Do you see
So
this?
that's
Do
what
you
he
see your
wants.
book collection expanding as your son grows older?
I believe so, yeah. And so what I'm doing in part, he has a couple of cousins as well, and so I'm using that target audience to be able to say, okay, what are they reading? What do they like? What do I like about what they like? And what do I not necessarily like about what they're reading, right? And so how do I make sure that what I'm delivering, so there's something, Captain Underpants. Are you guys familiar with this? Yes. Okay. Some of the content is a little, not just juvenile, but it's not necessarily about the things that I would want to teach my son, okay? So I'm not writing that style, right? Now I still want it to be fun. I still want it to be a little bit goofy, right? Because at that age, they like things that are silly. So I'm still pitching to that audience, but I'm doing it in a way that I feel like as a parent, I'm happy to see my son getting that kind of content, right? So, but anyway, but you're correct, and that is something that I've been watching happen is my son is departing from some of the content, and what I've noticed also, just doing some research, is that they say girls read more, right? That's just a thing, that girls read more. Why is that? And so part of that is because as I've been looking, and so I've been going to writing groups all over the country, and it's very clear to me that content is being pitched to girls. Now, which is the chicken and which is the egg? I don't know. But making sure that the app absolutely reflects the interests of boys and girls, but not explicitly. This is the girl category and this is the boy category. Never want to do that. But at least make sure that the content is there so that you can say, yes, these are good stories for my son and these are good stories for my daughter, and they might have different tastes. You might have a daughter that's into science. We're gonna have, I had a couple of dogs that passed away a couple of years ago, and so they're their own book concept that I'm working on, which is essentially creating detectives out of these two dogs, right? So that whole process is going to be appealing to boys and girls, right? Whereas Cinderella may really appeal to girls versus Captain Underpants appealing to boys.
One of the companies I've worked with in the past was trying to get into the assisted living community, and with a tech concept. And the reality is very few of those people have cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
None of them, I can't say none of them have computers, but very few have computers. Your concept is great for them. It's desperately needed for them. It's how to get that technology to the other side.
So, one of the things I thought about is individual residents of the community may not have the device.
Mm-hmm.
If the community has the device and has the account,
Mm-hmm.
the community essentially says, okay, you want to check out this device for an hour or a day or whatever and read stories, and you independently send them to your grandchildren, and then you give it back. And so we only need one device and one subscription, and we can let that work through a variety of different residents.
Yep.
It was interesting, your comment about your brand and how you see your brand. As you bring other authors into the fold, are you personally kind of looking at their work so to make sure it's consistent with your brand?
Yes. Are you finished?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 100% yes. There's no book that hits this without me reading it.
Okay.
Now, having said that, sometimes I can't, right? Different languages. So we've got an author that just provided us, she's a Russian and Ukrainian national, and so we've got 2 books that are coming out in those 2 languages. I can't read those. So I have other people who do speak that language. Part of my practice is that I've been an immigration lawyer for 20 years. So foreign language issues have been part of my professional life for that whole time. So I've got people who are able to read a variety of different languages. Secondarily, I'm the child of a child psychologist. So my mother being a child psychologist, she's the one that read the initial books and said, yes, this is good stuff. But I've since created an advisory board of 8 different people. A couple of them, so I've got a PhD who's a creative writing instructor in Arizona. I've got a linguistics professor in Toronto, right? So I've got this advisory board of people who are able to help me through. And then, I'll tell you a story. A few weeks ago, I got an illustration from one of the illustrators, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. And so I sent it to a friend, and the illustration had a connection to Arabic, the language. And so I said, hey, I don't know why I don't like this. Let me give this to someone who is culturally connected to this and get their opinion. And her response was, absolutely not. And she explained why she was uncomfortable in a way that I could never have explained. I just knew that there was something not quite right. So I very actively use my community of relationships to say, come into this process, help me review content, and make sure that what we're sending out there has value to people in a way that is beyond just, here's a book, read it, take it or leave it, right? I want to do more than that.
Yeah, protecting your brand is very, very important, because all it would take is one book getting out and it's offensive or whatever it is, and then your whole brand goes down. So keeping that surrounded with people that can help you with that is very important.
I believe that 100%. I thought there was a question over here, maybe not, and if not, then.
In 2.5 months, how many downloads do you have? And you said you had to get to 200. How quickly can you get to the 200 pay $4 a month subscriptions?
Yeah, so the first question in terms of downloads, we're just, so I intentionally do not pay attention to that day over day, week over week, right? You can sort of just get caught clicking and refresh, right? Oh, a new download. I don't want to be that guy. So I basically do a monthly, at the end of the month, I'll look back. And so I can tell you what February was, but I am not watching the kettle in March just yet. So February, we had just over 100 downloads. I think it was 112. And so.
How many, because right now it's on a per book basis, how many of those 100, how many books did you put on?
Yeah, so of the 100, well, let's assume it's 100 plus or minus. We only sold, just to be clear, I want to say the number in March and January combined was about 20 books.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. One of them was, if I'm reading to my son through this app, how much leeway do I have to add my little comments about what's going on in the story? Instead of just reading it word for word and then following along, sometimes I would imagine if I had my grandparents reading a story, obviously they would use the voices, but sometimes I think it would be funny if they would say little things about what's going on. Oh, you shouldn't do that, or kind of just funny little things. How much is that allowed or possible in the current setup?
So about 3, not quite 4 weeks ago, I started thinking about the ability to do that. And so what we've done is, as the recording finishes, it's still, the visual, it's still recording your voice for a few more seconds, so that A, if you're lagging behind, or B, if you're ad-libbing along the way, you can have that extra time to add that in there. So we want it to go so that it's not too noticeable to the child, right? But that it is still enough time for you to do some of that. So currently it does allow you to have those, I believe it's exactly 3 seconds at the end as it goes through, so that if you need a little extra time because of what you've been saying as additional content, it has that option.
The other question I had was, have you ever been, or have you thought of the idea of recording, I don't even know if this technology exists, but of recording someone's voice, certain words or whatever, and then being able to take that and just generate them reading the story, rather than having to do it?
Yeah, so what you're describing is essentially having a library of words, and then having the ability, so there's a number of ways you can do that. The thing about it is, this is an engagement experience.
Right.
So now, let's say I got James Earl Jones to read, whatever story to you, right? There's some value to that, and you know, but oddly enough, there's value to you as the adult. Really, the kid is sort of like, that's Darth Vader, right? So I'm not sure how much that experience really adds to the child versus for the adult. But so it's certainly something I've thought about. I've got a friend who is the voice of a character on Sesame Street. And so I've talked to her about creating her own catalog of sort of stories that she's read, so that when you have the subscription, you can literally say, I want so-and-so. Now I can't, because again, Sesame Street is an owned brand, so I can't pitch her as that character, but I can create a new character inside the app that will read to you, and you can say, okay, now I want Cinderella, but I want it by, you know, Susie Q, and that's who's reading it to you now. So that's something that I have looked at. You know what, I realized, before I take your question, gentleman in the green, I didn't answer your second question, I realized as I was going through that, which is how long to get 200 users, right? You did ask that. And so the answer to that question is basically, A, I don't know. B, the goal is to turn this, starting in the beginning of the second quarter, into free for a quarter. Just push it. You want it, you got it, unlimited access, and then close the door and see who's still inside. And if we can capture that universe of people. So that's the next move to do that. So basically, I won't have an answer in terms of the path until Q3, once we've closed the door and we see who stays inside.
Are any of those 100 users not from America or foreign?
Yes, yes. So I can track which countries are downloading. I'm doing no marketing outside of the US, but it is still leaking to other places anyway.
I think a lot of that would have to do with friends that live abroad.
I think that's right. I think that's right.
So I have a question from the Facebook Live from Veronica Maladin. Are there any school administrators or teachers on your board to help advise you on the development of getting your app into schools?
So Veronica, there are school teachers, but no school administrators that are actually on the board.
One more question. How much of the story do you need to have if you wanted to get creative? Do you have to have the full manuscript, or can I come to you with an idea that your team would be able to help kind of? Because if I've never written a story, I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
And so it's like if I had 2 dogs that died, and I'd love to come up with a story. Would your team be able to help with that? Kind of develop it into something, or do I have to come with the full thing?
So the short answer is part of what I do as a screenwriter, that picture that I showed with me around a bunch of people, that's what we do is workshop stories. And so literally in that's called a table read, right? So you bring your screenplay in, we read through it, and we're talking about it, and then we provide content, suggestions, and ideas. So I'm very comfortable with that kind of experience of someone saying, here's the story, and then I can say, okay, if you can take it this direction, I think that works, I'd be interested. If you give me a part of a script or a manuscript, and I say manuscript loosely, these things aren't very long, right? Picture books aren't, it's not like War and Peace or anything close. It's just like, it's like war. So anyway, but if you give me something like that where you say, here's 5 pages, do you like where I'm going? Yes, I can certainly take a look at that and give you feedback that's immediate, especially because they're so short, right? We can review these things very quickly and give you immediate feedback.
We got time for about 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up.
Perfect. Any more questions?
Awesome.
Great.
Well, hey, let's give them a Hey, we're super excited, and just what a great presentation, and we're just super excited about where this is going to go, because this not only is thriving just around community, but it also targets one big thing, and that's family. And for all of us, I think family is really important, especially when it gets to a son or daughter, somebody that you're just like my brother. I can, like, personal heartstring story.
Yeah.
My brother was in Iraq for a tour, and he has 3 kids. And I'm thinking, man, all 3 of those boys were under 5 years old. Would love to hear their dad tell a story. And so just kind of like, it's personable, and you can see the avenue of how this affects children and people underneath. So let's give another round of applause. And say thank you. Awesome. I got a few announcements to go through real quick, and we'll kind of go through that. If you haven't already, if you know somebody that would love to apply to present, or maybe you, I would encourage you to go to ymcwaco.com/apply, submit your application, and we'll get that reviewed and go through that as well. Another thing is thank you as the audience for your continued support. We couldn't do this without you guys. Your commitment to show up every week. People on Facebook Live, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. That's one of the biggest things that we as a community wanted to stay engaged with, is just really pressing the line and the boundary of asking questions, figuring out what's going on behind the scenes and what does this look like, how are you doing this, where do you get your traffic, etc. So if you know people who are doing entrepreneur stuff, small business, startups, whatnot, encourage them to go present to apply. And also I have an announcement with Ms. Carol from Startup Waco/Hustle, so you can go ahead and make your announcement.
Sorry, Corey's in the mountains this week, so you're stuck with me. He's pretty miserable. Okay, so how many of you guys heard about the Extra Code Big Idea Challenge?
Can't hear you. Yeah, there you go. Yes.
How many of y'all have heard about the Extra Code Big Idea Challenge? Okay, so some of you guys. Okay, so we're doing a very new thing with one of our sponsors, ExtraCo, and we are offering a $5,000 grand prize, cash prize. You don't have to have any sort of financial statements or anything to prove that your concept is worthy of this money. It's just a great idea. So we are running this until March 22nd. Applications are due, but we have an ideation session on Monday, March 18th, and that's free. We'll provide lunch. And one of our board members, Dr. Jeremy Vickers, is going to lead it, so it's a great time to learn how to pitch your idea. And you guys are going to get a sneak peek. We are partnering with a national program called Startup Week, and so we are actually bringing that to Waco for the very first time. And so that is April 23rd to the 25th, and it's basically going to be like a way scaled down version of a South by Southwest like conference with just multiple things going on throughout the day. Various different topics, intellectual property law, which this guy probably knows quite a bit about doing this, and all these great things, and tying in 1 million cups and the Extra Code Big Idea pitch event. So the top 3 finalists will pitch, be a community event, and there'll be food and drinks. So mark your calendars for that, and that will be more announced probably later on this week. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Also, side note, for Hustle, the co-working space will be open today, so you'll be able to hang out here for free. So feel free to have a phone call, use the booth, or have a meeting and just get to know people around here. Thank you guys so much for coming out. If you want to, get another cup of coffee before you take off, and you guys stay dry, all right? Thanks for coming.